Hi guys, welcome to Total Technik. This video we're focusing on the Audi S4, both the B6 and the B7 models. And in this particular video we're going to show you how to service the car yourself. So in this video what we'll be showing you is how to do a full oil change, including oil filter and sump plug washer, and at the same time also how to replace your air filter, and for good measure how to replace your pollen filter or your cabin filter as well. And in addition to that, towards the end of the video what we'll be showing you is how to check the various components such as suspension components and things of that nature all around the car for yourself, so you can kind of give it an interim health check and just double check that you're 100% happy with things before getting back on the road. So specifically looking at the Audi S4, the B6 or the B7, before we get stuck into the service, one thing to consider is how often this car should be serviced. Now when they came out of the factory these were set to the long life service, which is approximately every 20,000 miles or every 2 years, as opposed to lots of other Audi models which are on standard service intervals, which is 10,000 or 1 year. However, due to the kind of inherent potential issue that the Audi S4, B6 and B7 engines have, the BBK, with the cam chains and in particular the cam chain followers, it's a good idea to actually service these, or more specifically to have the oil changed much more often than that. 20,000 miles with this potential issue on this engine is far too much. Ideally what you want to be doing is changing the oil every 10,000 miles. Doesn't mean you have to do the full service every 10,000 miles. You can do, you can leave the other parts and do them every 20,000 miles if you like. But with regards to the oil, it's really important in these that they're changed every 10,000 rather than every 20,000, and that you do use the correct oil as will be covered in this video for you. So that's one very important thing to bear in mind on these. If you get into kind of the forums and people that are hardcore enthusiasts, they recommend that you change the oil kind of maybe every 5,000 miles, which is perhaps a little bit extreme, but you can understand the reasoning behind that argument. But certainly you really shouldn't be running these for kind of more than 10,000 miles between oil services. So you want to get that oil changed regularly and make sure that you're using really good quality oil to the factory spec. So with that in mind, let's move on. So looking at servicing your S4, B6 and B7 models, these are all of the bits that we're going to be changing as part of this service, so you need to go out and make sure that you've bought these in advance obviously of doing the work. So what we're going to be changing is the air filter, full oil change with oil filter, and we're also going to be changing the pollen filter or the cabin filter as well in this video. And the other thing that we've got here at the front, this here is the sump plug washer. So obviously when we remove the sump plug to drain the oil, it's always a good idea to replace the washer every time you do that. If you're unsure how old your sump plug itself is, it might well be worth just buying yourself a new sump plug, because they very often come with the washer included, so that's another thing to look at as well. There are additional kind of processes such as your brake fluid change and coolant change, which will need to be done at certain intervals, but as a general kind of point of view, all of the parts that we've got here, with perhaps the exception of the pollen filter, this doesn't always need to be changed every time you do a service, but with regards to the other filters and the oil, etc., those are going to be changed on every service that's done on this car. So make sure you've got these and we can move on. So with regards to the oil that we're using today for the S4 service, so you can see we're using Castrol Edge 5W30. This is a long life oil, and this is the manufacturer recommended oil. We're actually filming a video on the correct oil use for the Audi S4, so it's particularly important in this car due to the potential issues with the cam chains. So it's very important that you're using a good quality oil. Be sure to check out the which oil should I use in my S4 video. We had a link for you below this video on YouTube. Once that's ready, be sure to check that out. But whatever you do, don't be putting cheap, generic, horrible oil into your S4. There are potential issues with the cam chains, as is covered in that other video, so make sure you're using something proper like this. Okay, so what you want to do before the oil is drained is actually get the oil up to temperature. So either take your car for a run around the block, or just leave running for 5 to 10 minutes until the oil's up to full temperature. When your temperature gauge should be bang on dead centre at full operating temperature. As soon as it hits that, you can bring the car into the garage and you can get started on draining the oil. Okay, now we'll be using a ramp to lift the car today because we've got one here and it's nice and easy and convenient. However, doing this DIY style at home, you'll no doubt be using jacks. not a problem whatsoever. So what we want to do at this stage, obviously we've got to access the underside of the engine, so you're going to have to get it jacked up. Now really you want to jack it so it's even on both sides. So if you've got two jacks, a jack on either side would be ideal, otherwise you can put in one axle stand and a jack on the other side, or of course two axle stands, even better. But that's what we need to do first of all, is get it raised up in the air, because we're going to have to get to the underside of the engine. Okay, so you've got the engine up to temperature, you've now stopped the engine and you've now jacked it up. In our case we've lifted it up on the lift, but you would have jacked the front of the car up. So now what we're going to do is go to the underside of the car. First thing we need to do is get the engine tray removed. So let's look at that. So when you come underneath, first thing we need to do obviously is get this engine tray out of the way. Now as it's the S4 that we're working on, the B6 and the B7 are very similar with regards to their under trays. They're basically held on the same way, which is just a kind of a series of screws around the outside. So if you have a quick look here, we've got these 3 screws dotted along the front edge here. They're all flatheads. And then over towards the wheel arch there, we've got another one on either side there. And then also towards the back there, we've got another 3, one there, one on this little metal frame in the centre, and another one over in the corner there. The S4 actually has a separate engine cover and gearbox cover. We've got another further cover right at the back there, which is for the gearbox. But it's the kind of the front engine cover that we need to get out of the way to drain the oil. So just go around, loosen off all those screws, carefully lower it down and get it out of the way. So we'll do that next. Okay, so coming up underneath the car with the engine tray out of the way, the sump plugs are very easy to locate on the Audi S4, the B6 and the B7, obviously exactly the same. And that's located right here. So to give you some reference, we've got the anti-roll bar here. You see that passes along to the suspension there, and just in front of that, in the corner of the engine, is the sump plug right there. So that's what you want to be looking for. It's quite big, as you can see, and just to make sure you're definitely on the sump. Obviously it's quite a big thing, you can't miss it, but we've got the oil sensor there as well. So if you keep an eye out for that, you know you're definitely on the sump, and the sump plug is in this corner. Not to be confused when you look up underneath. There is another kind of plug just tucked in up there, but that's actually for your water pump, so that's for your coolant drain right there. So that's the one you don't want. Notice that one's quite small. It's the one that you want on the bottom of this kind of blackish brown pan right here. This big one, that's your engine oil drain plug right there. Okay, so now we're ready to drain the oil from the drain plug here. So what you want to do is make sure you've got your oil pan ready to collect the oil that's going to be dripping out, and you've got to identify what size socket you need for the sump plug. On the S4 that we're working on here, that's actually a H10, so it's quite a big thing. So make sure you've got the right bit for the plug. Make sure you've got your drain pan ready to collect the fluid, so it's going to come out pretty fast when it comes. And also make sure that that the pan that you're using is big enough for the quantity of oil that you know is going to be coming out of this car, or have 2 pans and be ready to swap them over. So there we go, as we can see, that's going to carry on draining. And what you want to do is, that's probably going to take about 10 minutes. Obviously it won't continually come out at this speed for 10 minutes, it will start to slow down. But this will keep dripping out for a good 5 to 10 minutes easily. So what you're going to do at this stage is, once you've got this flowing, and give it a couple of minutes just to get most of it out. And then what you'll actually do is lower the car back down to the ground, assuming that you've got a small enough pan to allow you to do so. And then you can kind of move on and change the air filter and things of that nature just for a few minutes whilst this is continuing to drip out. Like I said, this is going to take about 10 minutes or so, so we'll leave that to do what it needs to do. Okay, so we've left that for about 3 or 4 minutes. As you can see, we've still got a fairly good little trickle of oil, so I'm going to leave that to drain out for a few more minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the car down, and we're going to crack on with changing some of the other service bits in the meantime before we put that back in and refill the oil. And again, it's very important for you to do that, especially if you've jacked the car up. Obviously, if you jack the front of the car up, the whole engine's at an angle, and so the oil will run to the back of the engine. So it's very important that you actually bring it back down level again, otherwise you're not going to drain all of the oil out efficiently. So it'll be sat at the back of the engine. So it is very important, although it's quite tempting. I just want to leave it until it's drained. You are going to have to lower it back down to kind of let the last little bit of oil out. So here we have the scrap oil that's being drained from the car. Obviously this is going to vary a little bit depending on what country you live in. But no matter where you live, you want to get rid of this oil responsibly. Obviously never pour this down a drain or something stupid like that. Most recycling plants, you know, like your local tip, things like that, they'll offer oil recycling facilities. So if you put this in a couple of kind of big 5 litre containers, take it down to your local tip, there should be somewhere there where you can recycle this oil. Whatever you do with it, just make sure you get rid of it responsibly. Okay, so we've got the oil draining underneath, and what we've done is we've lowered the car back down onto the floor so it can drain as efficiently as possible, and we're going to do some work in the engine bay. The first thing we're going to do is just crack the lid off of the oil filter. Again, that will help the kind of draw the air through the system and help get rid of any oil that's left in there, in and around the filter and things of that nature. You'd be surprised how much kind of comes out when we crack the lid off. So what you want to do is obviously gain access to your oil filter on the S4 that we're working on today. It's under this engine cover at the rear. Just gently pull that upwards, and this is what we're looking for right here. So once you've identified it, you've got to identify what it is that's going to allow you to release it. Obviously on the S4 here, it's fairly obvious. We've got this big hex, which is a size 24, and so we're just going to use a size 24 socket on this one. If you're on a different model of Audi, then you might have again something very similar to this, or you might find that the top of it's actually flat, but it has flat edges on it, and you can get oil filter kind of remover tools, that kind of the cups they are that sit over the top, and you plug your wrench into it and just it undoes the whole thing that way as well. But in most instances you should have something very similar to this as we have on the S4. So remember, this thing's only plastic. It tells you on there how tight it needs to be tightened up, and hopefully whoever worked on the car before you did it up to factory spec, which in this case is 25 Newton meters, which isn't that tight, so it shouldn't be that hard to remove. Obviously it is only plastic, so if someone's put it on at a ridiculous amount of Newton meters, it's possible to damage the cap, but hopefully that won't be the case in this instance. There we go. So yeah, whoever did this correctly, whoever did this last did it correctly, and I know that because I did it myself. So it's definitely done to 25 Newton meters. Go. So we don't need to remove that just at this stage. What we're going to do is break the seal just to allow the air to flow through. You might need a little bit of blue paper depending on how well it goes back down into the base from the thread. That's okay so far. There, you can hear. Hopefully you guys can pick that up on the camera. But because I've opened that air seal, and I've got a load more oil that's pouring down into the pan at the base. So we have broken the air seal there. So that's going to allow all the air to pass through there. Perfect. And we're just going to leave that like that for a few minutes until we're ready to replace the filter that's inside. So just whilst we're waiting for the oil to continue to drain out, we might as well crack on and replace the air filter at the same time. Now on the S4 here, obviously it's quite easy to identify the air box. If we have a quick look here, we can do this quite easily. We have a vent, an air inlet here which is built into the grille, 2 screws which hold on this pipe here. This pipe attaches to a second pipe that's actually joined in the middle of these, and this pipe goes down into the top of the airbox. So obviously this right here is your airbox, and your airbox leads off to your MAF here, your mass airflow sensor, and then you've got another pipe here that goes off to your throttle body, etc, etc. So once we've identified the airbox, which is quite easy on the S4 there, what we'll do is a little bit of strip down work to get these pipes off of the top, and then we can get to the box itself. Okay, so what we're going to do is get rid of these couple of torque screws right at the front, just to try and free up this front air intake pipe. Let's get those out of the way. Next, I'm just going to separate these two pipes carefully like so, and that'll allow me to draw the front pipe forward and pull it out like that. So with the front pipe out of the way, the rear pipe just should lift straight up and out. We do have a sensor connected at the rear here, so I'm just going to pull this out. It's got like a little rubber casing that the little plastic tab passes through. So I'm just going to draw that through now. There's a split on the rubber on this one, it's a shame. Like so, just a little kind of a barbed tab that passes through this little kind of rubber section there. So if I move that to one side, as you can see, this is the top of the airbox here. So we've now got the access that we need to the actual top of the box right here. So next up, we need to identify what's keeping the airbox together. Sometimes you can have little kind of pop clamps, so have a look around the edges of it, kind of work out how it's kind of held together for yourself. Quite easy on the S4 as we're working on here today. I've got these two screws in the top corners, so we'll get those removed. That should allow us to open up the box. So what you'll find when you've got this removed, again depending on what model of Audi you're working on, you're not going to get a lot of space, and you may have to disconnect this rubber hose from the mass airflow sensor to give you the room that we need to get this removed, as we have to do on the S4. So we'll get that done now. So to disconnect the two, just want to attack this metal strap. You can either completely undo it, as I've done here, just to get it to one side, or you can kind of undo it enough so you can kind of move it up out of the way. I find it a little bit easier just to completely remove it and put it to one side. Okay, so the hose itself, so I kind of grab the whole thing and gently open it up. Here it is. And then we just kind of put that to one side, like so. Next up, we're just going to get rid of this hose on the side. It's got two little kind of squeeze points on it. So if you squeeze that either side, just give it a bit of a wobble side to side. That just gets that out of the way, like so. And next up, we've got this one on the side. Just pop that out. It's going to give us a little bit, make it a little bit more easy to lift it when we get it freed out. To be able to kind of lift this up efficiently, we need to move the fuel lines to one side. But to allow us to do that, we've got to move the mass airflow sensor plug here to allow us to kind of feed these around and kind of get these removed. So we're just going to pop this plug off, and then we'll get these lines out of the way, and hopefully we can lift this out of the way. So to release that, we just kind of pull this up with your fingers, and that will release the mechanism. Pull that tab up and pull the whole thing forward. So next we've got the little clip on the top, allows you to free off the two air lines, and again we can move those just to the side there, and that allows us to lift this airbox up. Be careful with them, they are relatively delicate. So now if you lift this section up, that should allow you to slide the whole thing straight up. It kind of hinges in at the bottom, so we'll get that removed and out of the way, like so. So here we can see this is the bottom edge. So the bottom edge literally just hooks in, and then the top edge obviously has the screws that we removed earlier. So that's why you can kind of lift the whole thing out, and it's really the only the screws that are on the top is the only thing that really hold the airbox together. At the bottom is just kind of almost like a hooked hinge, if you like. So now we've got access to the air filter. As we can see, the air filter on this particular car is quite clean. It's not done many miles since the last service. But it's going to be replaced anyway. So what you want to do is just carefully lift this out. And we'll get rid of that. So here we are looking in the airbox, obviously with the air filter removed. As you see, we've kind of got some leaves and kind of pollen and just kind of general debris. Just kind of tends to build up over time. So what we want to do is give that a quick vac out before you fit your new filter. So once you're ready, you want to get your nice new air filter, and we'll fit that into situ now. What we want to do is just make sure that all the edges are kind of free of dirt, because if there's any debris around the edges, sometimes can lead to a little bit of an air leak. We're okay there. So what we want to do is just gently put this down, slide it into the airbox, and then we need to ensure that it's seated correctly. So what you want to do is just go around the edge and kind of feel that it seems to be sitting correctly on the edge all the way around. So just have a quick feel of it, make sure it feels good, it feels strong as it should. If you're happy with it, then obviously we can look at replacing the lid. Okay, so we're going to lower the airbox in. What you want to see is just on the corners of the airbox, just down there. Those are the kind of the lugs just there that the hooks fit into. So that lug that we just showed you is obviously you're going to hook this in behind that lug, if that makes any sense. So that's what you're going to be looking for when you feed this down. There he is on the S4, as we've got here. Because the airbox is in so tight, what you've got to be careful of is when you kind of angle this, put this in down, what you want to do is angle it as far forward as you can so that you clear the bottom edge of the air filter. When you look down to the bottom of the airbox, which you can kind of just about see down in that gap somewhere, you can kind of get you a shot of that. If you can just see the bottom edge of it there. If you can see kind of the orange edging sticking out of the bottom, then it hasn't seated correctly. And if you're not careful, it will chop the bottom edge of that foam off. So what you've kind of got to do is get as much of a forward angle as you can to begin with, lower it down so that bottom edge sits correctly on the inner edge of the airbox. And that's kind of what takes the time, really, is to ensure that that gets seated correctly. And then you can kind of work the rest down and get the top edge seated correctly as well. Okay, so now we just need to go back and tidy up everything that we removed. So pop that back into situ. Pop this air hose back on. Make sure that's in nice and tight, clicked into place. Fuel lines. Electrical connector for the mass airflow sensor. And the rubber hose. Clip for the hose. And you come to tighten this up. You don't want it ridiculously tight, you want it fairly tight, so obviously it's got to be airtight. Like so. and your rear pipe's going to go back in. So I just want to pop this back through there, and again make sure it seats correctly. Like so. And the front section. Make sure that the holes align in the top there. When you're happy with that, what you can do is you can put these back together. I'll show you this from a different angle, just so you can kind of see how this fits together. So on the inside of the front pipe, you can see you've got these little kind of tabs, little guides if you like, 4 top, 4 bottom. And obviously what you want is the edge of this lower pipe to actually sit in this guide to ensure that you get a nice connection. So when you come to line them up, make sure that they all fit inside the little guides like so. Now ready to put the 2 screws back in at the front. Okay, so next we're going to be removing the oil filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of paper dotted around the housing here, because it's likely we're going to drip a little bit of oil when we pull this across. I'm just going to dot a few pieces around just to help protect the engine when we draw this out. Okay, so now ready to lift this out. So I've got something to lift it out onto. I've put some blue paper around just to make clean up a little bit easier. I'm just going to lift this onto this, and then we can get it away from the engine bay. So I'm going to undo the whole thing, pull the whole unit straight up. You see the filter's attached to the cap. Give it a bit of a wiggle. That'll come off like so. So we can get rid of that now. So first thing, we just need to separate the cap from the filter. Just give it a bit of a pull. It's on like little plastic tabs, and the whole thing will pop off now. So we're now ready to dispose of the filter. Obviously, we need the cap. Okay, and very important, when you open up your new oil filter, it will come with a new O-ring. It's very, very important that we replace this, and this actually sits around the edge of the oil filter cap. Hopefully you guys can see that right in the video. This section here, you see it moves. That is the rubber gasket right there, so that's going to be removed and replaced with a new one. So grab yourself a hook tool. If you turn it around, usually, yeah, there you go. Usually put a little cutout in there, just to allow you to kind of get safely underneath it. So get underneath the old one, and we'll just get that removed, like so. Next up, we'll just give this a bit of a clean up before we fit the new O-ring. Just spend a minute or two getting that cleaned up, and then we'll refit the new one. So when we refit the new O-ring, what we need to do is actually, you see it's bone dry at the moment, what you want to do is actually put a little bit of oil around it. What that does is it helps keep that supple, make that potentially last longer, and of course being moist, it'll actually create a slightly better seal as well. So it's very important that we do that. So what we're going to do is take a couple of drops of fresh oil. Rather than stick your fingers in it and potentially put particles in there, you just need a tiny little drizzle of your oil like so, and we use that to coat the new seal. So get that good and coated, and once you're happy with it, we'll fit it onto the cap. Remember, it's that final kind of big groove that you want to get it sat in. All the way around like that. And what we'll do at that stage, so let's take a little bit more oil. And let's give it another quick wipe over for good measure as well. There we are, so the seal is good to refit. So now we can put the filter into the cap. So again, as we can see, we've got these little tabs in a circle. If you look inside the cap, you can see the circle there. So these tabs need to snap into the centre of that circle. So you kind of feel it. There you go, just snaps in like so, and then this is ready to be refitted. Okay, so obviously we've got the hole in the centre. Just fit over the spool there, all the way down like so. And then we're going to re-tighten this up. When you tighten this up, remember we've got that gasket right near the end. What you want to make sure, keep an eye on it, make sure that goes inside the housing of the actual air filter itself, kind of the aluminium frame if you like. What you don't want is that to pop up and be sticking out at any stage. So that should kind of pop inside there quite nicely. So just keep an eye on that as you continue to tighten it. Seems to be going in okay. But have a good look around the outside, make sure you're happy with it, and then we can get a torque wrench onto it to torque it up to spec for the final part. Okay, again, so when you come to tighten this up, just double check. You see this one says 25 Newton meters. They almost always say on top of them what they are. So you want to get a proper torque wrench. Thankfully this one goes as low as that. Not all of the larger ones do. You might have to use a 3/8 rather than a 1/2 inch one. And again, as you tighten it, just keep an eye on the on that seal, on that gasket. Make sure it's not popping out around the sides anywhere. He's gone in okay. Okay, so it's not going to take a map. There you go. That's literally it. Yeah, that's it. So that's your 25 Newton meters. So that is done. So we can get rid of all of the paper now. Give it a final wipe over. Make sure you're happy that it's all clean. That's the oil filter done. So we're ready to refit the new sump plug. Give that a bit of a wipe off. Like so. So we'll have a quick look at the sump plug next. There's one very important thing that we must do. So when you would have removed your sump plug, obviously you would have seen this sump plug washer. This is actually what they call a crush washer. If you have a look on the back there, you can kind of see it's got a ring around the outside. Now the reason why it's really important that this needs to be replaced with the new one is obviously what this is connecting to is kind of a factory machined, if you like. So it's going to be pretty near damn flat, but it's not going to be 100% flat. There will be slight imperfections and things. It heats up all the time. There's a lot of pressure on it. So what you want to do is ensure that you always get a brand new washer. So every time you do this, I've got the new one here. You see this one's quite a lot thicker because this one's not been crushed yet. But you want to, every time you replace this, you always want to put a new washer on. So we'll make sure that we do that now. So we'll just finger tighten that just for a second, like so, and then obviously we're going to torque that up to factory spec. Now on the S4 that we're working on today, this is 50 Newton meters. That might vary depending on what Audi model you're working on, but what we're working on today, the S4, that's going to be 50 Newton meters. But if you do a search online, if you're doing it on another model, it's very easy to find out what the correct torque spec is. There it is. Perfect. Okay, so that's torqued up to factory spec, 50 Newton meters. Okay, so time to refill the oil. The Audi S4, B6 and B7. The factory spec oil is Castrol Edge 5W30. This video is not sponsored by Castrol. I wish that it was, but unfortunately it isn't. This is the correct factory oil for this car. We're actually producing a video on the correct oil usage for your S4, but I've linked to for you below this video, so you can go and check that out as well. That might be quite interesting to watch. Obviously on the S4 we do have potential issues with the cam chain system, which is located at the rear of the engine, more specifically the cam chain followers. And what we've tended to find, as we'll cover in more depth in the other video, cars that have been to kind of Audi all of their lives, regardless of mileage, and would only have had this spec of oil in, tend to be a lot healthier than cars that have kind of been to various different local garages where they can kind of put any old oil in. So I think there is something to be said for using the correct oil. If you don't want to use the Castrol, that's fine, that's your own decision, but whatever you do, make sure that you're putting good quality oil into this car. It is absolutely essential because of the cam chain followers. You don't want to be putting in cheap nasty stuff. Stick to something good. So ideally Castrol Edge 5W30, but if you want to move away from that, that's fine, but like I said, keep it good quality stuff, don't put rubbish in there. So let's get the oil cap off. And we'll get ourselves a funnel, and then we're ready to start putting the new oil in. So what you want to do is just start your oil off, pouring in. Now, it might sound obvious as well. One other thing to point out is that obviously we're using a funnel to put this in, and you guys should as well. The reason being is you really don't want to drip any oil down the side of your engine, because when that obviously heats up, when the engine gets hot, you're going to smell burning oil, and you could think there's a potential issue. So just keep everything nice and tidy. Use a funnel. You know, a funnel's what, £1, like $1.50, something like that, and they're, you know, really useful bit of kit. And it just stops you making a complete mess. So I really wouldn't try doing this without a funnel. So get yourself a funnel and crack on. So as I mentioned before briefly, if your capacities, if they say for example is 5 litres, you don't just want to go and throw 5 litres of oil into the engine. Because you've got to remember, not every single drip of oil that's in that system is going to come out. So yeah, technically it might be 5 might be the capacity, or 9 as it is on the S4 here. But you don't want to go and throw all that oil in straight away. So for example, if your capacity is 5 litres, put 4 litres in, and then we'll check on the dipstick each time, and then put another 100 ml, something like that, a tenth of a litre, and just keep doing it until you get to the correct level on the dipstick, allowing the oil to settle for 30 to 60 seconds, something like that, between putting it in and checking on the dipstick. So what I've done on this one, the capacity is 9 litres, as working on the Audi S4. I'm just over 8 litres. I've probably got about 8.2 on here at the moment, 8.2 litres. And obviously the engine's fairly cold again now. But if we give that a quick check, we can see that the oil is sat just below the maximum mark. Hopefully you guys can see that okay, if I kind of shine it in the light a little bit. That's just below the maximum mark, so that is absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to run the engine up to temperature, and once it's at operating temperature, we'll check the oil again. The Audi Workshop Manual recommends the engine should be at least 60 degrees, so I'm going to get it to operating temperature, then check that oil again, and we'll top up if required once everything's running and the engine is warm. Okay, so what we want to do first of all is put the key in the ignition, turn the ignition on, make sure your headlights and your stereo and aircon are all switched off, just so it doesn't drain the battery. Just going to leave that for about 30 seconds, 60 seconds before we fire up the engine. You fire it up completely starved, you get quite a lot of cam chain rattle, which obviously is not ideal. So we've got the engine up to just over 60 degrees, and we're going to check the oil level again. nice there. You can see we've got the oil levels now dropped quite a lot. We're just below the minimum on the dipstick. I'll just do a double check of that. This is why it's important to get the engine hot and to double check before you go kind of driving it off. So you can see there we're below the minimum. So we're on the dipstick, it's just about at this level here, but we're below the ideal minimum. So we're going to top up with a bit of extra oil. You can see what a difference it makes between having that engine cold and having that engine warm. So make sure you warm it up when you're checking your final levels, and make sure it's warmed up properly, at least 60 degrees. Just give it a bit of a top up. Being realistic, what you don't want to do is put too much in. It's much easier to put a little bit more in than it is to get it out once you've put it in. Okay, there we go. We are bang on. I don't know whether you guys can see that on the camera, but that is bang on halfway to the between the minimum and the maximum marker. So that's the perfect level. So that's job done. And what you want to do with your oil is, once you've been running this running the car for a few days, just give it a double check. If it needs a little bit of a top up, you can always give it a bit of a top up as time goes on. But be sure to check that kind of within a couple of days, maximum kind of week, something like that, and just top up if necessary. So next up, you should check the level on your power steering fluid. This is the reservoir right here. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your car's on a flat level surface, it's not jacked up, and it's been on there a little while, so that the fluid level will have reset itself. You've got a little inbuilt dipstick. So what you want to do is just lift it up, and we'll have a little look on the dipstick here. There we go. You can see we're exactly on the max level there. So that's good. But again, obviously if yours is running a little bit low on your power steering fluid, you need to top that up to get that between the minimum and max lines there. So make sure you do that, and we move on to the next stage. So next we want to check the coolant. There's a couple of things you can do to check the coolant. Obviously you've got a minimum and a maximum level marker here on the side of the reservoir. So obviously you've got to make sure that you're somewhere between those two marks to start off with. So that's checking the level. Then also we've got to check the quality of the coolant that's actually in the system. Now, to enable you to do that effectively, you're going to have something like this, which is a antifreeze or coolant tester. It has little discs inside, and I will show you how to use this in just a second. These are quite inexpensive. These are probably about £10. Which is what, $15, something like that. But really essential piece of kit, especially if you're going to be doing any service work on your car, because it's really important to make sure that the coolant, your antifreeze, is fit and healthy. So you will need one of these to conduct that test efficiently. Next up, whilst you're here in the engine bay, it's always a good idea, and you're kind of running through these processes, to top up your screen wash. So I'm going to do that next. So whilst you're here, you might as well have a quick check of the level on your brake fluid reservoir. To gain access to it, you can just pop the scuttle tray out of the way. That only takes a couple of minutes. We filmed a video for that as well. If you want to scroll down below this video, I'll have a link for you there, so you can just quickly go and check that video out if you're not sure how to get the scuttle tray out. Dead easy. You'll have that out in 2 or 3 minutes. And once you've got access to it, this is what you're looking at here. And what you want to do before you do anything with the brakes, I mean, we're not going to open it up to test the levels, but always a good idea whilst you're here is if you've got like a degrease or a good cleaner, just to give it a good clean all the way around, including the cap, just to keep it clean and tidy. It's especially important when you're actually doing any work on the brake system, that you don't get any dirt or grime in there. So it's always a good idea, especially whilst you're here and you've gone to the trouble of removing the scuttle tray, just to keep that nice and clean and tidy like so. So once we're happy that that's clean and tidy, we'll have a look at the level. So if you look on the side here, hopefully you can see this on the camera, you can probably see the one there on the bottom. It says minimum, there's a little arrow there, and this one right here at the end of my thumb, just there says maximum, and obviously we've got a level there as well. It might be quite hard to see on this particular reservoir. It's pretty much exactly on the halfway line. Maybe you can see on the camera the bottom half's yellow, so it's got the fluid in, the top half's clear. I can't quite get it to splash around enough, but that's pretty much exactly halfway between minimum and maximum. So that's worth a check. Obviously, if you're lower than that, if you're getting near to the minimum, then it's time obviously to top that up. We might want to look at a brake fluid change, but well worth checking whilst you're here. And just a quick note with regards to your brake fluid. Obviously the brake fluid does need changing every once in a while. As a general rule of thumb, every kind of couple of years is good. Very similar to the antifreeze really. 3 years isn't a problem depending on mileage. 4 years is kind of pushing it a little bit. You can get little testers, which we'll look at in a second, so you can kind of test the quality of it. But you should kind of take a look in the service book of the car and just double check, as it might vary a little bit again depending on what country you live in. Check the service book and it should show you what the correct interval is in your country for the brake fluid change. So that's always worth doing, and make sure that you stick to schedule on that as well. Now, if you want to test the quality of the brake fluid that's in your car, you can buy little electronic testers such as this one. This is one from Gunson, but there are plenty of other models available. You can buy these quite inexpensively, places like eBay, things of that nature. And this is just an electronic brake fluid tester. And what this does is this will test the quality of the brake fluid that's in the car. And when we say the quality, what we mean is how much water is contained within that brake fluid. That's the problem with brake fluid. It does absorb water from the atmosphere or for any little leaks or anything that you might have around that system, which is why obviously it does have to be replaced every now and again. So this will test how much water is in that system, which effectively will tell us the quality of the fluid that's in there. So well worth getting if you want a kind of a cheap DIY way to kind of keep on top of your brake fluid. So next up we're going to look at the pollen filter change, aka the cabin filter. And on most Audi models, most common Audi models, the filter itself is actually located in this box at the rear here, kind of underneath tucked away underneath the windscreen here. So what you've got to do is you've got to remove the scuttle tray, which is the plastic kind of panel that sits over the top here. I've already filmed a video on how to do that. You can remove that in 2 or 3 minutes. Really simple. If you're unsure on how to do that, I've got a link for you. Go down, check that out, get that removed. And then once you're at this stage, what we're going to do is we're going to look at accessing this box and changing the filter over. So first things first, we've got this pipe, which is kind of the breather pipe for the battery. You can see it sits in the side of the battery there. It goes down, disappears in behind the wing. It's held in with a couple of metal clips. So what we're going to do is just carefully unclip these 2 clips, like so. And then when you're removing the lid, that we're going to be doing in a minute, you've kind of got to be careful that you're not putting undue stress on this. The end that you don't want to pull, this end's fine. If you pull that end accidentally, it will just pop out of the side of the battery. You can just push it back in. The end that you don't really want to be pulling too hard on is the end that actually goes down into the wheel arch area down there. So be careful when we lift the lid of this breather pipe. So we've got 2 little plastic clips on the front that are holding this in. If you push it back, that will allow you to lift the front of the lid like so. And what you can do, again, you've got to be careful of the electrical connector for the battery here. Just kind of squeezes past it. You try and keep it quite low and just keep drawing it forward. Keep your eye on the breather pipe as well. Here it comes. There it is. Okay. There we go. So there's a few things to kind of balance around as you remove it, but just take your time. Like so, that lid will come out, and then what you're left with is the old filter there. Now to remove the filter, you just want to grab one of the fins, lift the front edge up, and you can see here, so quite an important thing. Hopefully your one will show this as well, but it shows where the direction of the airflow. We've got this little arrow here, clearly says airflow, and it's got the arrow pointing downwards. That's because the filter is more effective in one direction than the other. So obviously what we're doing is we're drawing air in through the top, and it's going in to the cabin. So in this instance, the arrow should be pointing down. So when you come to fit your replacement, obviously if you're fitting a genuine Audi VW one like we are here, it will say this on the side. but it might say it on the on one of the other sides, or it might say it on the packaging. But yeah, be sure to put it in the right way, because it likely is directional. So we'll continue to get this out. Again, just be careful of this breather pipe. Got some damage to this one, as you can see. But that is that's the pollen filter there removed. So with that out of the way, that'll go away to be disposed of, and we'll refit the new filter. So again, as I mentioned before, you want to check out the direction that it says for the airflow. Make sure you fit that with the arrow pointing downwards. Like we're fitting kind of any filter, once you've got it in, you want to have a good feel around the edges, make sure it feels like it's seated correctly, and when you're happy, that one's good, we can look at popping the lid back on. There you go, seems to have slotted into place quite nicely there. So I'm just going to snap these front clips back in, like so. Yeah, it feels pretty good. So with that done, what we'll do, I'm just going to pop this back into the side of the battery, the little breather pipe, and clip the two metal clips back in, and that's it. That's the pollen filter done. So when it comes to refit the scuttle tray, what you want to have a look at before you try and fit it is you've got kind of this kind of rubber edge that's built onto it. As you see, this rubber edge comes around the where the arm sits, wiper arm, ends here. Then you've got a gap, and then it starts again over here and goes into the corner. And if you transfer that kind of directly onto here, you can see fits it exactly. So we've got this section that comes along here, comes around and then stops, and then again we've got a gap, and then it picks up again and rolls right to the end. So what we want to do is get this kind of rubber seal to go into this groove and make sure that it's seated nicely all the way along. That's kind of the key to putting this back in properly. So quick note when you're seating it, a good place to reference is the kind of line around the ECU box here, because it actually got to go in quite a lot further than you might initially think. There, it actually sits in quite fairly tight around this box. So as you can see, it actually goes in a fair old way further than you probably initially think. So to refit your rubber seal, it's got a groove in it. What you want to do first of all is going to line it up, make sure it's central and it kind of fits evenly on both sides. And once you've got that, what you want to do is start on one end, just push it on all the way across. Be careful of your electrical connectors as you come across. Just work the full width of it. And you're doing it, pushing it on kind of about every inch or so. Like so. And then just go back over, make sure it's all nice and tight. Yeah, we're happy with that. That's good. So that's everything that's required for a basic service has now been done. So what we're going to do now is, whilst we're looking over the car, is we're going to give the car a bit of a kind of a basic look around and a bit of a basic health check. We've kind of done that around the engine bay, so we've kind of finished in this position. So what we're going to do is get the wheels off and kind of have a look at the brakes and the suspension and things of that nature. Again, this video is not designed to be a replacement to getting your car serviced by a professional mechanic. However, as an interim service and little kind of checks that you can do between services, things you can check for yourself just to check that your car is kind of healthy, we're going to be doing that in this video as we progress along. So let's take a look. Okay, so once you've jacked your car up, before you kind of get around to removing the wheel itself to kind of have a good visual inspection, it's a good idea just to check that you're happy with the wheel itself. A couple of things you can do is just to check that it turns freely. You should hear a little bit of rubbing in the brake caliper. That's just where the brake pad literally sits on the surface. But you shouldn't have much resistance there. It should turn fairly easily, like so, and provided you're happy with that. The other thing you can do is grab the whole thing and kind of give it a bit of a wiggle. Yes, you can, you can literally, you'll almost be able to turn it side to side. That's not what you're looking to do. What you're looking to do is see if it's got any kind of movement in it. You can hear the whole thing moving, but that's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is a kind of a rattle in this actual wheel itself. If when you're doing this, all you're doing is kind of moving everything, yeah, that's nice and solid. But if you kind of get a feel for it, it should be nice and rock solid, like so. That's a quick kind of check that you can do before you get this wheel removed. Another thing to have a quick look at is obviously the condition of the tyres. Now the tyres have depth markers in them. Hopefully you guys can just about see those there. There's one there. There's another one just there. It's kind of like a little raised lump in the kind of within the tread of the tyre itself, and basically that marker there is set at the minimum legal tread for the country in which you live. So as you can see, where this tyre's got a lot more tread left on it than the height of the marker, so you know this tyre's still got a lot of life left in it. Obviously, if your actual treads on your tyres are level with the markers, then they're going to be borderline illegal to run in your country. So that's something to bear in mind. Just have a look at the markers. And another thing to check is that the tyres are wearing evenly across their face. So you should kind of get a feel for how much tread there is. It should be kind of even on both sides. And again, when you're kind of looking at the edges of the tyre here, get a feel for how much tread there is on both sides, just to see if it's wearing evenly. Obviously, if your tyres are wearing unevenly, then you might have something like a wheel alignment issue that might need to be looked at as well. That's just a kind of a good thing to do, just keep an eye on the ongoing kind of condition of your tyres. So all you want to do first of all is have a look at the condition of the bushes and stuff on your suspension joints. You see this one's good. What you want to look for to see if any of the rubber has perished or started to rot or anything of that nature. What you're looking for is anything that looks untoward, anything you wouldn't be 100% happy with. So just have a look at all of these. Just spend a few minutes. There's no rush, especially when you do it on your own car. When you take your car in, people are doing the work for you. Obviously, they're against the clock. They don't want you. They don't want you. You don't want to be paying them, 20 minutes just to look at the suspension rubbers. Whereas, on your own car, you can take as long as you like. So that's the kind of thing you want to be looking for. So make sure you're happy with those. Next, have a look for any kind of brake lines or anything that come down into this area. Again, with things like brake lines, obviously they're quite exposed when they come into areas such as this, and so the weather can get into them. We're looking for any signs of corrosion, any kind of splits, anything that looks nasty. Again, these are looking pretty good, which is nice. Checking your suspension arm, rubber joints. You just want to kind of move around the area and just have a look at one thing at a time. Make sure you're happy with it. Again, you've got your suspension springs here. Again, what you want to be looking for on suspension things is things like corrosion. They've got like a plasticized coating on them, like a powder coating. Often that splits and the rust can start to get into those. So again, you want to look at things like that. That's actually for your steering, by the way. Again, just looking for any splits, anything that doesn't feel right in there. And again, coming off the caliper, we've got the brake lines here. It's just dirt actually. Got a little bit of corrosion on the little bracket there. They often do that. These little brackets, they don't seem to be made of any kind of stainless material. They often rot away. The actual pipe looks okay, which is the main thing. So just keep an eye on those. Again, check the condition of your drive shaft. We're going to kind of come underneath to do that. Again, we've got a bit of surface corrosion towards the rear of the shaft there. But again, doesn't look too bad at this stage. That's something to keep an eye on for the future. So again, coming underneath, you've got your anti-roll bar. You've got rubber bushes here that you want to keep an eye on. There's an anti-roll bar link there as well. You want to make sure that the rubber's not too perished. When this perishes out, you kind of get a knocking from the anti-roll bar. Looking good. Again, we've got another rubber mounting in the suspension there, which all looks clean and tidy. So just checking each one by one and just making sure that you're 100% happy. And what you're looking for, like I say, is anything that's kind of perished or split or anything of that nature. Another important one to check is your CV boots. These are the boots that sit on the CV joints on the end of the drive shafts here. This kind of rubber boot. And again, what can happen over time is they just kind of get a little bit of rot in them and they'll split. And what will happen is a telltale sign. If you find a load of oil on the inside of your wheel, what happens is this will split and it will spit all of the oil out, and then of course the water will get in. And once the water's in, it's not going to be long before the oil's gone, and then you've got a bad joint, and you might have to replace the whole joint if it's left unattended to. So again, if you find any splits on these, it's much easier just to replace the CV gator now than it is to replace a joint later. So you've obviously got an outer one here, and then we'll take a quick look at the inner one as well. So you want to do the same thing again, is have a good look around the CV gator here on the inside as well. Again, looking for any splits or anything that looks untoward there. So next up, quite a big and important one is to just keep an eye on the general condition of your brakes. And obviously you've got the discs and the pads, so we'll start with the disc. So if you basically kind of feel the face of the disc, you can see on this one, hopefully you can kind of get a bit of an angle on it. It's got a tiny little lip. It is only small at this stage. We have some surface rust, because I know this car's been stood for a couple of weeks, so I'm not too concerned about that. That'll all rub off when it starts to get going again. Tiniest little edge on there, that's nothing to worry about. If you start getting quite a big edge on there, it means the brake pads have kind of gone quite deep into the disc, and so it's pitted. That's a kind of a good sign of kind of general wear. But these are looking quite fit and healthy, and again feeling the both sides of it, that's feeling okay. So those should have plenty of life remaining on them. You do tend to get, especially if they've been on the car a little while, tend to get this kind of little kind of surface rust, as you can see kind of on the top of the disc here. You can normally kind of knock that off and knock it a little bit that off. That doesn't necessarily mean that your discs are shot. Once they've been on the car a little while, that's kind of a normal part of the process. But as you can see, these should have plenty of life remaining. So that's how to do a kind of a quick kind of visual inspection, is to kind of get a kind of feel for the thickness and look at how pitted they are. So next, looking at the pads. So obviously here's the brake pad within the caliper just there. And obviously the bit that's directly touching the caliper is like the backing, and the bit that's actually touching the disc is the actual pad part of it, if you like. That's the bit that kind of wears out over time. As you can see, there's plenty left on these. They're still nice and thick, nice and chunky. I'd say they're not even quite half worn, those, so they've got quite a lot of life left on those. So that's how you check the kind of the outer pad. To check the one that's on the other side, if you look down the back of the caliper's got kind of a hole in the back of it. Get a little bit of light in there. Yeah, and again, you can see this is the That's the backing of the pad, and this is the actual pad here that's touching the disc right here. It's got a little chip out of it there. There's nothing to be too concerned about, but again we can see nice and thick, nice and chunky, still plenty of life remaining there as well. Another thing that's worth doing before you look at putting the wheel back onto the hub here is on the kind of face of the disc. Obviously the disc touches the kind of the rear face of the wheel, as it were. What I do is, again, it's my own personal car, so I just do it 'cause I'm a little bit fussy with it. It's just like a little bit of copper grease, also known as kind of an anti-seize, just between the two surfaces. And what you'll find is this will help prevent them from binding. If you've ever had it where you've tried to remove a wheel, you take all the wheel bolts out and it doesn't move, then it's likely because you've got a little bit of water in here that's dried, or a little bit of dirt and or water that's dried in behind here. Creates a bit of a seal, and so it can be quite hard to knock off. Audis, to be fair, aren't particularly bad at the wheel sticking on the hubs, so this is kind of might be a slightly needless endeavour, but on plenty of other brands this is pretty much essential. So worth doing, just a little bit, don't put too much on, but that will just help ensure they're not going to stick together when you next take the wheel off. So again, from the underneath, just looking around the engine components, see if we've got any water leaks, oil leaks, ATF fluid leaks, any kind of leaks at all, where everything looks fairly nice and dry. Remember, if you do spot a leak, it's not necessarily coming from that part of the car. Oil and water and things like that can kind of drip down, travel across the width of the car and actually drip out the other side of the car, but obviously it is indicative of a problem. So that's something that's worth checking out as well. What you want to do is just kind of check out the general kind of condition of it. For example, you can see you've got some surface rust here. Yeah, it's just surface rust. Just starting on a couple of these mounting points here. Now, if it's your own car, obviously you're going to want to look after it. What I'm going to do next is show you a product that we use here. It's called a wax seal or tetra seal. There's various product names for it depending on what brand you go for. That helps kind of seal this kind of thing up and helps prolong its life. So when the rust starts to get in, and obviously that's the very beginning of what could become a very big problem. But if you seal it up properly, you can pretty much curb that problem, get a good few more years out of it before that would need to be addressed. So that's something we'll look at in a minute once we continue to kind of have a check around the underside of the car. So it's worth having a look at your exhaust system as well whilst you're under here. Most exhaust systems, this is the downpipe here coming into the lower of the two cats. It's got a cat further up on the S4 as well as two cats. You have these little flexi hoses. This tends to be kind of the weakest point. These tend to be the things that kind of break first and corrode out first. As you can see, this one's actually had a replacement, a brand new one there, stainless one that's been put in there. That was probably done a couple of years ago. This is the original one here. So again, check all the joins along the exhaust system. Again, just looking for general kind of condition. And you want to do that kind of all the way down the full length of it. Again, checking where where the original welds were done, just to check, see if we've got any leaks opening up there as well. So that's worth spending a couple of minutes having a look at whilst you're here under the car. So again, we're just coming in, checking the conditions of the back boxes for the exhaust. Making sure everything looks okay in there. You've got your rear anti-roll bars. Make sure that the rubber's not looking perished. Those looking okay. And check the condition of the roll bar itself. And again, checking the suspension components up in the wheel arch, exactly the same as we did from the outside. Just kind of getting a different angle on things. You get a better view of the rear inner CV gaiters there, things of that nature. And have a quick look over your rear diff if your car's a Quattro, as the S4 obviously is. Check that we haven't got any leaks or anything untoward happening there. Sometimes sweat a little bit. This one's looking okay. What we're going to do is a little bit of a kind of corrosion prevention using the tetra seal or the wax oil. So we'll show you that as kind of a last stage. Like I said, with this, it's just a general health check. Hopefully anything that's obvious should stand out to you as you kind of go around the car. So that's it. So we'll show you the Tetra seal, and you should be just about all done. Okay, so if you want to seal up any of your kind of components that start to show any kind of signs of corrosion, just to help protect them a little while, get an extra year or two out of them, you can use a product such as this. It's a Tetra seal. It's made by Carplan. It's basically another kind of common name for this is wax oil. And basically, when you kind of paint it on, you can spray it as well, as you can see in the diagram there. But generally, you kind of paint it on to anything that you want to protect, and it kind of paints on like oil. But when it dries to kind of a waxy finish. That's why they call it wax oil. So it's almost like having a little layer of candle wax, on whatever you put it on. And so when you come to, if you put it on, let's say a nut to protect a nut that you've noticed is starting to corrode, if you then need to undo that nut, you kind of crumble the wax off of it, so it creates like a watertight wax seal, essentially. So that's what this stuff does. So what we'll do, I've given it a good shake. I'm going to get a little container. I'll just cut the bottom off of a plastic bottle here. Get a good glug of this stuff, like so. I've got myself two cheap and cheerful brushes, a dry one and one that I'm going to use in the product. I'm going to use the dry one just to kind of brush off any kind of dirt, etc., before you actually seal it with the product. Okay, so the little bit we were looking at earlier is this little bit here. So using a dry brush, just going to get rid of any kind of dirt, dust that's on there. Obviously anything that's loose, you want to knock that off, so that's going to stop you getting a good seal. It's no good painting this stuff over the top of dust. So give it a good wipe over like so, and then we can apply the product. Of course, this is an entirely optional thing to do. You don't have to do this. A lot of car enthusiasts swear by this stuff. You don't have to be particularly neat with it. Kind of slap it on, really. Kind of the beauty of it. You kind of get the general idea. What you want is a nice kind of coating over any area that you're not happy with. Like I said, this is just a preventative measure, really. This might be the difference between having to change a component in 6 months' time or having to change it in 2 years' time. Sealing it in from the weather can do it a world of good, but it's not going to solve the problem, but it will certainly will help as a preventative measure. So again, anything that you're not happy with, just take your time, go around the whole car and seal it up, and that'll certainly help you a little bit for the future as well. So there we go. Hopefully you've had a good look around your car. You've checked everything, you've made sure you're happy with everything, and if you found something that's untoward, obviously you need to get that addressed or fixed or replaced or whatever it is you need to do. Assuming you're happy, it's time to put the car back together. So we're going to put the gearbox and the engine covers back on underneath, get the wheels back on and lower this back down. And then we're going to do a reset on the service indicator, which is what we're going to show you next. Now, with regards to servicing your own car, it's obviously at your own discretion whether you make a note of it in the actual kind of service book. Obviously, you won't be able to stamp it because you've done it yourself. But if you are doing the service work, it's really worthwhile keeping hold of any invoices for the parts that you've bought. So when you buy your oil and your air filters and this, that and the other, it's worth keeping that invoice with the car and maybe making a note of what the mileage was on those invoices when you changed it. So obviously when you come to sell the car in a few years' time, it's very useful to have that information that you can pass back, saying, well, I did a service here at 87,000 miles and here's an invoice for all the parts that I bought, so that it's easier for the person who's buying the car to realise that the work was actually undertaken. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. But with all that in mind, let's get the service indicator reset on this car, and then we'll get you back on the road. So when you put your wheels back on, what you should do is kind of tighten up the wheel nuts so they're tight, and just get a little bit of a feel for them. You'll see these aren't very tight yet. Just get a little bit of a feel for them with your normal wrench. Do them up evenly, get the car down on the floor, then you want to use a torque wrench to ensure that you torque these up to the correct factory spec. That's going to vary a little bit depending on what model you're working on, but many Audi models, including what we're working on today, the Audi S4, is 120 Newton meters. It's really, really important. What you don't want to do is over tighten the wheel nuts, because if you were ever to break down the side of the road, you'll get the little wrench out of the boot. that's like this long, and if you've over tightened them, you're really going to struggle to get them off again without something a bit more hefty that you won't have necessarily on the side of the road. So for the sake of the health of the car and to get yourself out of a pickle, you should always do them to the correct factory spec. Okay, to reset the service indicator, what you need to do is identify these couple of little buttons at the bottom of the dash here. There's one with a wrench on it for the service indicator and one with the 0 on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the wrench, put the key in, turn the ignition on. It'll come up with a little message on the screen saying service OK, and whilst that message is there, you want to press and hold the 0. So we'll start with holding down the wrench, key in, ignition on without starting the engine, wait for the little message to come up, hold down the 0. As you can see that there, the lines, which are normally numbers, tells you how far you've got to your next service. They all went to little lines rather than numbers, so that is actually reset. So if you just press the normal service indicator, you can see that the service has been reset there, and what will happen is the new set of numbers and days and miles rather, will automatically appear on there when you've been driving the car for probably kind of 10 to 14 days and maybe a little bit longer, because it's based on kind of how you drive the car. But that's reset your service indicator. So like I say, after a little while that'll come up with the new figures once you've been driving the car around for a week or two. So that's how you reset the service indicator on the A4, S4 and RS4, B6 and B7.